Letter 21. To the Honourable Daines Barrington, Selborne, September 28, 1774. Dear Sir, as the swift or black martin is the largest of the British hirundines, so is it undoubtedly the latest comer, for I remember but one instance of its appearing before the last week in April, and in some of our late frosty, harsh springs it has not been seen till the beginning of May. This species usually arrives in pairs. The swift, like the sand martin, is very defective in architecture, making no crust or shell for its nest, but forming it of dry grasses and feathers, very rudely and inartificially put together. With all my attention to these birds, I have never been able once to discover one in the act of collecting or carrying in materials, so that I have suspected, since their nests are exactly the same, that they sometimes usurp upon the house sparrows, and expel them, as sparrows do the house and sand martin, well remembering that I have seen them squabbling together at the entrance of their holes, and the sparrows up in arms, and much disconcerted at these intruders. And yet I am assured by a nice observer in such matters that they do collect feathers for their nests in Andalusia, and that he has shot them with such materials in their mouths. Swifts, like sand martins, carry on the business of nidification quite in the dark, in crannies of castles and towers and steeples, and upon the tops of the walls of churches under the roof, and therefore cannot be so narrowly watched as those species that build more openly. But, from what I could ever observe, they begin nesting about the middle of May, and I have remarked, from eggs taken, that they have sat hard by the 9th of June. In general, they haunt tall buildings, churches, and steeples, and breed only in such. Yet in this village some pairs frequent the lowest and meanest cottages, and educate their young under those thatched roofs. We remember but one instance where they breed out of buildings, and that is in the sides of a deep chalk pit, near the town of Odiham, in this county, where we have seen many pairs entering the crevices, and skimming and squeaking round the precipices. As I have regarded these amusive birds with no small attention, if I should advance something new and peculiar with respect to them, and different from all other birds, I might perhaps be credited, especially as my assertion is the result of many years' exact observation. The fact that I would advance is, that swifts tread or copulate on the wing, and I would wish any nice observer that is startled at this supposition to use his own eyes, and I think he will soon be convinced. In another class of animals, namely the insect, nothing is so common as to see the different species of many genera in conjunction as they fly. The swift is almost continually on the wing, and as it never settles on the ground, on trees, or roofs, would seldom find opportunity for amorous rites, was it not enabled to indulge them in the air. If any person would watch these birds of a fine morning in May, as they are sailing round at a great height from the ground, he would see, every now and then, one drop on the back of another, and both of them sink down together for many fathoms, with a loud, piercing shriek. This I take to be the juncture when the business of generation is carrying on. As the swift eats, drinks, collects materials for its nest, and, it seems, propagates on the wing, it appears to live more in the air than any other bird, and to perform all functions there, save those of sleeping and incubation. This hirundo differs widely from its congeners in laying invariably but 2 eggs at a time, which are milk-white, long, and peaked at the small end, whereas the other species lay at each brood from 4 to 6. It is a most alert bird, rising very early, and retiring to roost very late, and is on the wing in the height of summer at least 16 hours. In the longest days it does not withdraw to rest till 9:15 in the evening, being the latest of all day birds. Just before they retire, whole groups of them assemble high in the air, and squeak and shoot about with wonderful rapidity. But this bird is never so much alive as in sultry, thundery weather, when it expresses great alacrity, and calls forth all its powers. In hot mornings several, getting together in little parties, dash round the steeples and churches, squeaking as they go in a very clamorous manner. These, by nice observers, are supposed to be males, serenading their sitting hens, and not without reason, since they seldom squeak till they come close to the walls or eaves, and since those within utter at the same time a little inward note of complacency. When the hen has sat hard all day, she rushes forth just as it is almost dark, and stretches and relieves her weary limbs, and snatches a scanty meal for a few minutes, and then returns to her duty of incubation. Swifts, when wantonly and cruelly shot while they have young, discover a little lump of insects in their mouths, which they pouch and hold under their tongue. In general, they feed in a much higher district than the other species, a proof that gnats and other insects do also abound to a considerable height in the air. They also range to vast distances, since locomotion is no labour to them who are endowed with such wonderful powers of wing. Their powers seem to be in proportion to their levers, and their wings are longer in proportion than those of almost any other bird. When they mute or ease themselves in flight, they raise their wings and make them meet over their backs. At some certain times in the summer, I had remarked that swifts were hawking very low for hours together over pools and streams, and could not help inquiring into the object of their pursuit that induced them to descend so much below their usual range. After some trouble, I found that they were taking Phryginia, ephemerae, and libellulae, cadue-flies, mayflies, and dragonflies, that were just emerged out of their Aurelia state. I then no longer wondered that they should be so willing to stoop for a prey that afforded them such plentiful and succulent nourishment. They bring out their young about the middle or latter end of July, But as these never become perchers, nor that ever I could discern, are fed on the wing by their dams, the coming forth of the young is not so notorious as in the other species. On the 30th of last June, I untiled the eaves of a house where many pairs build, and found in each nest only 2 squab naked puli. On the 8th of July, I repeated the same inquiry, and found they had made very little progress towards a fledged state, but were still naked and helpless. From whence we may conclude that birds whose way of life keeps them perpetually on the wing would not be able to quit their nest till the end of the month. Swallows and martins, that have numerous families, are continually feeding them every 2 or 3 minutes, while swifts, that have but 2 young to maintain, are much at their leisure, and do not attend on their nests for hours together. Sometimes they pursue and strike at hawks that come in their way, but not with that vehemence and fury that swallows express on the same occasion. They are out all day long in wet days, feeding about, and disregarding still rain, from whence 2 things may be gathered. First, that many insects abide high in the air, even in rain, and next, that the feathers of these birds must be well preened to resist so much wet. Windy, and particularly windy weather with heavy showers, they dislike, and on such days withdraw, and are scarce ever seen. There is a circumstance respecting the colour of swifts, which seems not to be unworthy of our attention. When they arrive in the spring, they are all over of a glossy, dark soot colour, except their chins, which are white. But by being all day long in the sun and air, they become quite weather-beaten and bleached before they depart, and yet they return glossy again in the spring. Now, if they pursue the sun into lower latitudes, as some suppose, in order to enjoy a perpetual summer, why do they not return bleached? Do they not rather perhaps retire to rest for a season, and at that juncture moult and change their feathers, since all other birds are known to moult soon after the season of breeding? Swifts are very anomalous in many particulars, dissenting from all their congeners, not only in the number of their young, but in breeding but once in a summer, whereas all the other British hirundines breed invariably twice. It is past all doubt that swifts can breed but once, since they withdraw in a short time after the flight of their young, and some time before their congeners bring out their second brood. We may here remark that, as swifts breed but once in a summer, and only 2 at a time, and the other hirundines twice, the latter, who lay from 4 to 6 eggs, increase at an average 5 times as fast as the former. But in nothing are swifts more singular than in their early retreat. They retire, as to the main body of them, by the 10th of August, and sometimes a few days sooner, and every straggler invariably withdraws by the 20th, while their congeners, all of them, stay till the beginning of October, many of them all through that month, and some occasionally to the beginning of November. This early retreat is mysterious and wonderful, since that time is often the sweetest season in the year. But what is more extraordinary, they begin to retire still earlier in the most southerly parts of Andalusia, where there can be no ways influenced by any defect of heat, or, as one might suppose, defect of food. Are they regulated in their motions with us by a failure of food, or by a propensity to molting, or by a disposition to rest after so rapid a life, or by what? This is one of those incidents in natural history that not only baffles our searches, but almost eludes our guesses. These hirundines never perch on trees or roofs, and so never congregate with their congeners. They are fearless while haunting their nesting places, and are not to be scared with a gun, and are often beaten down with poles and cudgels as they stoop to go under the eaves. Swifts are much infested with those pests to the genus called Hippoboscae hirundines, and often wriggle and scratch themselves in their flight to get rid of that clinging annoyance. Swifts are no songsters and have only one harsh screaming note, yet there are ears to which it is not displeasing, from an agreeable association of ideas, since that note never occurs but in the most lovely summer weather. They never settle on the ground, but through accident, and when down can hardly rise, on account of the shortness of their legs and the length of their wings. But neither can they walk, but only crawl, but they have a strong grasp with their feet, by which they cling to walls. Their bodies being flat, they can enter a very narrow crevice, and where they cannot pass on their bellies, they will turn up edgewise. The particular formation of the foot discriminates the swift from all British hirundines, and indeed from all other known birds, the hirundo melba, great white-bellied swift of Gibraltar, excepted. For it is so disposed as to carry omnes quatuor digitos anticos, all its 4 toes forward. Besides, the least toe, which should be the back toe, consists of 1 bone alone, and the other 3 only of 2 apiece, a construction most rare and peculiar, but nicely adapted to the purposes in which their feet are employed. This, and some peculiarities attending the nostrils and under mandible, have induced a discerning naturalist, footnote, John Anthony Scapoli of Carniola, M.D., end footnote, to suppose that this species might constitute a genus per se. In London, a party of swifts frequents the Tower, playing and feeding over the river just below the bridge. Others haunt some of the churches of the borough next the fields, but do not venture, like the house martin, into the close crowded part of the town. The Swedes have bestowed a very pertinent name on this swallow, calling it ring swallow, from the perpetual rings or circles that it takes round the scene of its nidification. Swifts feed on coleoptera, or small beetles with hard cases over their wings, as well as on the softer insects. But it does not appear how they can procure gravel to grind their food, as swallows do, since they never settle on the ground. Young ones, overrun with hippoboscae, are sometimes found under their nests, fallen to the ground, the number of vermin rendering their abode insupportable any longer. They frequent in this village several abject cottages, yet a succession still haunts the same unlikely roofs, a good proof that the same birds return to the same spots. As they must stoop very low to get up under these humble eaves, cats lie in wait, and sometimes catch them on the wing. On the 5th of July, 1775, I again untiled part of a roof over the nest of a swift. The dam sat in the nest, but so strongly was she affected by natural storgy for her brood, which is supposed to be in danger, that, regardless of her own safety, she would not stir, but lay sullenly by them, permitting herself to be taken in hand. The squab young we brought down and placed on the grass plot, where they tumbled about and were as helpless as a newborn child. While we contemplated their naked bodies, their unwieldy, disproportioned abdomina, and their heads, too heavy for their necks to support, we could not but wonder when we reflected that these shiftless beings in a little more than a fortnight would be able to dash through the air almost with the inconceivable swiftness of a meteor, and perhaps, in their emigration, must traverse vast continents and oceans as distant as the equator. So soon does nature advance small birds to their helicia, or state of perfection, while the progressive growth of men and large quadrupeds is slow and tedious. I am, etc.,